Thank you very much, Alex. It's so great to be here. So thank you very much for having me. Quite an honour to be asked by the DDD organisers to come and talk to you today. And I was feeling a little nervous, but since jumping on the call, I feel like I know about half the people in this room and have worked with most of you before. So yeah, I'm honoured to be talking to you today. I hope you find some of this useful. Okay. Can you all see a Miro board? So I have moved away from the Google Slides PowerPoint pack. This could go either way. It's going to be a journey for us all together, I think. And this is originally based on a workshop that I put together a couple of years ago, because prioritization and trying to understand what you should be working on is probably the number one topic that comes up when we're coaching new technical leaders. And in fact, this is still an ongoing struggle, learning journey for me as well. I feel like every time I'm in a new role, I have to relearn this and add to this skill set. So it's great to be starting the conversation as you're moving from, say, a principal engineer or a senior developer into a technical leader, just to get some of these ideas and thoughts front of mind. So our agenda today, I'm going to talk about 4 tools that I found really useful in terms of prioritization, and these are the pieces that I still work through every week and every day. So first we're going to look at the self-management quadrants. Then we'll look at a delegation matrix. So how do you understand when you should be making a decision or when you should be delegating something to your people? Then I'll go through my absolute personal favourite tool, which is personal Kanban, and talk a little bit about why I find that so effective and how you can use that to be effective as well. And if we have time, I'll talk about calendars and some tips and talk about what perhaps you should be doing with your calendar to help you prioritise the right things. Okay, I've gotten where everything is on my board. We're going to go this way first. Okay. So I just want to start by introducing this concept of self-management quadrants. Now this comes from one of my favourite books, which I have here, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I can't see my self view, so I'll hold that up later if you didn't see it. And that's by Stephen Covey. And he really talks about we need to move away from thinking about managing time, so time management, and think more about managing ourself. So from time management to self-management. And he really talks about that there's two different criteria for assessing the tasks that we work on day to day. One is their urgency and one is their importance. So here we go, come up with a little 2x2, which managers absolutely love. And we have quadrant 1, which talks about urgent, important work. Quadrant 3, which is urgent and not important. Quadrant 2 is not urgent and important. And quadrant 4 is not urgent and not important. So first I'm going to talk about what the quadrants mean, and then we'll work together to think about, well, how did the tasks that you do day to day as a technical lead fall into these quadrants? So first of all, quadrant 1 talks about activities that are urgent and important. So these are the things that come at you and you really have to drop what you're doing to get onto them. So there's some crises in your work when there's pressing problems. It could be deadline-driven projects. And really ringing phones and Slack notifications. We tend to see a Slack notification, that little red circle pop up, and feel like that's something that we need to give our immediate attention to. So this is something that feels like it's urgent and important. Really a great definition is things that act on you. So things that you don't really feel you have the power to put to the side for the moment. And if we go to quadrant 3 now, these are things that are urgent, but not really important. So this is where you might be interrupted. You might get some Slack messages that break your concentration or your thought. They interrupt your work. Some emails seem urgent because we want to respond to our emails when they come in, but sometimes they're not really important. Meetings can be this way. So this talks about proximate pressing matters and some popular activities as well. So if we move across to the things that aren't urgent, Q2 is really activities that is about prevention. And the second point here, building production capability, is probably the key point. So if you work in prevention and you work to build capability, you'll be able to produce a lot more going forward. It focuses on relationship building and also about recognising new opportunities and planning. And recreation is actually in this quadrant because when we rest and we have good work-life balance and we're active and we're fit and healthy, then that actually increases our production capability as well. So we'll just skip down to the red quadrant, quadrant 4. So these are things that are not urgent and not important. And these include things like trivia, busy work, some emails, some phone calls or Slack messages. I would say that some Slack threads that I end up going down in my day could be considered in this category. So these are time wasters and pleasant activities. Michelle, I'm sorry to do this to you, but I'm going to have to put my aircon on because it's getting a bit warm in here. Okay. Now, so something I like to do when I feel like everything's getting on top of me and I'm concerned that I'm not focusing on the right things is I'll take a look at everything I've done in the week and I'll plot it on this matrix here. So this is an example of some tasks. When I've run this as a workshop, I've actually asked people to write a post-it note every time they did something for the week and then bring it along to the workshop. These are examples from those workshops, and there are also some things that I've taken from my own week as well. We're not going to go through every single one of them, but we'll go through some of them. So let's start with, if you're dealing with a production outage, this is something that tends to be a crisis and something you have to jump on immediately. So we would consider that over here, this urgent and important section. Handling a security breach, absolutely, I consider that over here. Sometimes we get urgent ad hoc requests of features from sales that the world will end if we don't release them. So that once again is over in our Q1 activities. I would even consider if you have to backfill a key person after a resignation, that's also something that becomes urgent and important and acts on you, sometimes out of the blue as well. And I've also got manual GDPR deletions, tend to be urgent and important. And the final one would be having to create interview questions and scorecards, like as you're walking into an interview. That's something that can press on you and has to be done immediately. So when we are focusing all our time in Q1, in quadrant 1, this can be quite a tough way to live. You feel like you're always fighting fires and you're always dealing with crises. And what we tend to do when we feel like this is to gain back some control or to take the pressure off. We'll move from these Q1 activities straight into these Q4 activities to kind of feel like, we just want our mind to go somewhere else. And it's probably not what we want to be doing. But some of the Q4 activities include like reading Slack threads, some group emails. I have this aversion lately to group emails that require a response from I don't know who, so I'll tend not to read them unless somebody tags me directly. This is one I wrote that I was guilty of. I went down an internet rabbit hole while researching architectures, ended up comparing tea to coffee and developer productivity for some reason for about an hour of my day. And I'll also include this one, attending a status meeting that could have been an email. I would say that's a definite Q4 activity. So when we go into, we'll look at Q3 now, so some urgent and not important. This can be things like, a manager requested a status update by close of business. Something that tends to press on you tends to be urgent, but in terms of its importance, how is that really going to help you achieve your goals? Responding to a request for urgent assistance. So this might be when someone else has something that's important to them and is urgent for them, and they might be managing by crises, and they've asked you to deal with part of that. Now that is urgent, but it's not necessarily important to you. So I think that's an important distinction. Just because it's important to someone else doesn't mean it's important to you. We're going for time. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about the not urgent and important. So here I've got working on technical debt to stabilize a system. This is something that you'll probably have on your backlogs, and it will be sitting there for every sprint planning, and you'll never quite bring it in because there's always something more pressing to take care of. So it tends to rot and it tends to languish. One-to-one catch-ups. Here we've got relationship building. Your one-to-one, having really strong relationships with the people that you're managing and also your peers can help you to avoid some of the urgent, important crises that could come up, like having to backfill a key person after a sudden, unexpected resignation. Completing an action in your career development plan. How about creating this workshop, putting this together? So for me, this would be about building production capability. If people are following good prioritization practices, you're going to have higher capability as a team overall. Ordering Yale tickets for the team. I think it's pretty important, people being educated. Running daily stand-ups. Conducting post-incident reviews, absolutely. Participating in retrospectives. I don't think all my Q2 activities can fit. I've got yoga in here because if I don't do my yoga, then my production capability drops right down. So this is important for me. Pair programming on a feature. Writing performance reviews, really important to be able to grow your people and build your production capability. And I've also got this one here, writing a personal mission statement. So this can be, writing a personal mission statement or just spending time thinking about what is my role now, what do I value, what are my goals, and having a clear idea about what that is. And if you find that you're often in this Q1 space, sometimes we don't really take the time to stop and think, well, are all the things we're dealing with really that urgent, and do they align with my goals and my priorities? So now we're going to talk about a bit about the results that come from operating in these areas. So let's start with Q1. Often when you're working this way, you will be highly stressed. And unfortunately, this leads to burnout and crisis management. You feel like you're always putting out fires and you can feel like you're never in control. And as I was saying before, sometimes when you feel like this, the only way to escape that is to come down here to Q4 just to take the pressure off and just to do something different. But unfortunately, when we do that, this actually results in an inability to do our work. We become very dependent on others, and there's a lack of accountability. So doing these pieces means you're not really holding yourself accountable for maybe some more important things like in this Q2 quadrant up here. The book goes so far as to say you'll get fired if you spend all your time down there. Something to consider. So how about Q3? When we're operating here, we really do have a short-term focus. So we might know that there's these larger pieces of work we need to do that are going to help us, but urgent things come up, and for some reason, you know, we prioritize them first. We have that recency bias going on, and we really do have a short-term focus. You can feel victimized and out of control, and it also leads to shallow and broken relationships, because sometimes you're prioritizing the urgent, unimportant things that come up over, say, relationship building, or over some of these prevention activities. So there's a reason that quadrant 2 was in green. This is really where you want to try to operate and where you want to focus your time. So here, the results you can expect is you will have vision and you will have good perspective. You will be able to have balance, and you'll feel more in control, and you'll have fewer crises. So sometimes the first time that you do this, you might find that all of your tickets or tasks end up in this Q1 urgent, important area. Sometimes we go through periods where we feel like we're just fighting fires and we're living by crisis management. And so what we really need to do is get more of a balance. Like, I'm not saying that you will never have crises you have to deal with, but if that's all you're doing and you're never spending quadrant 2 activities to reduce the crises, then you'll never get out of it. And really the best way to kind of rebalance and sort out the way you work is to very quickly just stop doing everything in Q3 and Q4. So this could mean just replying to people and resetting expectations when they ask you to do something. If your boss comes to you and says, oh, I need this thing by the end of the day, really question that and ask them what the impact would be if you delivered that in a time frame when you feel you could actually deliver that. Because running a PIR, a post-incident review, to deal with or to assess your latest production outage is probably more important than something that's coming to you urgently that needs your attention, that's not important. So really cut back on all your Q3 and Q4 activities. Spend more time in Q2. And when you do this, you'll realize, or you'll start to notice, that a lot of these Q1 pieces tend to become less of a crisis, and they'll happen less frequently. Okay, I'm going to move on now. I have a little tip along the way. This was some advice. Gee, that's a bit out of focus. Some advice that was given to me by Hannah Brown, and something that has probably changed the way I approach what I do, and that's to remember the 80-20 rule. So you get 80% of the impact you want with the first 20% of your effort. So if anyone else is naturally a perfectionist like I am, this might resonate very strongly with you. Sometimes we don't. I can see Bron smirking a little bit. Sometimes we don't feel like something's done or it's good enough, and we might not even go ahead with it, when in fact we may have done enough to get at least 80% of the impact we're after. So when you are looking at your Q2 activities, just remember, perfection is the enemy of done. Get it to a point where either you're happy with it or someone else can take it over, or you can start iterating on it later, and just go for it, go ahead with it. The next thing we're going to talk about is delegation. So this matrix comes from the Manager's Path, which is something you've probably all seen. This is an excellent book if you're wondering, okay, so I'm a tech lead now, what does that mean? I've always found it really useful to refer back to this book just to figure out what it is my job's supposed to be at any present time. So this one really talks about categorizing tasks along different criteria, And here we're talking about the frequency and the complexity of tasks. So things that happen frequently and are quite simple. So this could be running daily stand-ups, updating the team's progress report or code reviews, something that's simple but infrequent. So this could be organising the occasional conference tickets, or running a script that generates a quarterly report. Then we've got things that are complex and frequent. And this includes project planning, product roadmaps, system design, so technical architectural designs. Maybe there's an outage going on, and being the go-to person is something that's quite complex and can happen quite frequently. And onboarding new people, quite complex as well. And then there's infrequent and complex. So these are things like performance reviews, hiring plans and such. So we come across to our list of tasks that we completed. This is the same list. And we'll have a look at how we might plot these on the delegation matrix. So dealing with the production outage is something that we've put under frequent and complex. Ordering Yao tickets for the team. So that's something that's quite infrequent and quite simple. It's just one of those ad hoc requests that come up. Creating a workshop, probably in here as well. I don't necessarily think my yoga is something I'll be delegating to anyone. Handling a security breach. How about my manual GDPR deletions? You know, maybe that is frequent and simple. Running a daily stand-up, fairly simple, fairly frequent. Okay, programming on a feature. That might be, no, I'll put some in the bottom one. Would be, I think I had one about, actually, let's move this over here. Conducting PIRs. I would say that was complex and frequent. I've lost my my card about performance reviews, but let's pretend that there's one in there. Right. So once you've plotted everything on your frequent and simple, we can say that anything in this square is something that you really want to delegate. So if you're not dealing with things that are repetitive and quite simple to do, then that's going to free you up to do other things. So to work on those quadrant 2 activities. Really, the idea is when you move up a role, sometimes it's really hard to understand. This is something I still struggle with today. Well, how has my role actually changed? And what should I be leaving to my people? And where should I be focusing my time now? And sometimes I think, oh, I'll just do this stuff because it's just easy and I don't want to burden them with it. But what you're actually doing is reducing their opportunity to grow and their opportunity to learn these things, iterate on them and improve their own practices. So if something is frequent and complex, this is also something you should delegate, but perhaps a little bit more carefully. So it might be that you start this by delegating, having them shadow you and come along to the journey, and then you might get them to drive the next iteration of this, with you shadowing them and providing them advice, and then perhaps going forward that's something that you can hand over and just and you ultimately get to a point where they let you know how it goes, but they've got the skills they need. So this is called, my little star down here, it's called stewardship delegation. So really delegating to grow your people. Then we come across to infrequent and simple. You just do it yourself. Like sometimes it's more complex to explain and go through all the details and provide all the context to somebody when it's something that's not going to help them grow, and it's not going to be something that's going to help them develop. So that could be creating workshops, ordering YAL tickets. Maybe there's some kind of, oh no, that's not a good idea. Good example. We'll move on. And now we'll look at infrequent and complex. So this is where you would delegate to train, but it's a little bit more nuanced. So this is performance reviews, hiring plans, even hiring people in, so looking at recruitment as well. So you can delegate your performance reviews, but what you can do is ask people that you're trying to train up to be leaders to provide feedback for their peers and to coach them on that feedback and how successful that feedback was. So they can do an element of it without having to, break confidentiality. And same with hiring plans. You can take them along for the journey and get them to shadow you and just go through your thinking without having to leave it to them. And of course, you don't delegate your one-on-ones because that's relationship building. So that's our quadrant 2 activity. All right. Let's see where I go next. So we've covered the matrix, the quadrants of the importance of the work, and also talked about how you should delegate. And now I'm going to go across and talk a little bit about my favorite tool ever, personal Kanban. So I've been using this and quite consistently since, probably almost since I've been using Agile. So 12 years, I think, and this is something that I find really helps me. So this I was aware of. Is that big enough? This is something I used before I heard about the skills management quadrants and also the delegation matrix as well. And I've adapted it to incorporate those ideas, but still at its essence, I find it to be particularly useful. So for me, when I'm feeling out of control and there's so much going on in my head and I feel like I'm missing things and things are falling off, and you might feel like this sometimes too, and it's not just things that happen at work, but it could be things at home that I forgot to do, and when this happens to me, I can't sleep. So it usually is me getting up in the middle of the night, and I just get everything in my head out and I put it, either write a list or I put it on a personal Kanban board. And so from the times where I've moved away from using personal Kanban, whenever I go back to it is when I get in that state. So if you ever get in that place, this is probably a good time for you to start thinking about this. So step one is really just to reduce the cognitive overload of holding everything in your head. So all those bits and pieces that you need to do, you can see adding to the backlog of items. So these are the same items we've been discussing, but I've also added personal items, and I've added items to do with running a meetup as well. So all these things, they do press on you, and you need to not compartmentalize work and home, but really bring them together and realize you're a whole person. And you might be at work, working on work things, and something like, having to take the car in for a service, or I haven't paid for school camp yet, could be weighing on you and stopping you really giving your full attention to what you're doing at work. So that's why we try to think about everything you have to do together and manage it all in one place. So you'll get everything out of your head, you'll chuck it on, use Post-it notes or use a checklist or whatever that is, and put that in your backlog here. And usually once I've done this, I start breathing a little bit deeper and I feel the pressures just come off, and it's not just all in my head having to keep things in order anymore. I can visualize it, I can see what needs to happen, and this is how I feel like I'm a little bit more in control. So, this should be very familiar to most of you. It's a very simple Kanban board. It has a ready, doing, done column. and it's got the additional element of having a weekly goal. So what's important here is that the planning happens weekly and not daily. So you will find that you'll be more effective if you're not using the recency bias of what's popped up, you know, over the day to decide how your week goes. So for me, this is Monday morning. I'll get in and I'll have a look at my backlog and I'll think about what my goal is this week. So a question you could ask yourself is what one thing do I want to accomplish this week that is going to make a tremendous amount of difference to my team or myself? So if I do this one thing, how is that going to help my team improve their capacity, their production capability? So this is something you can define, and I would say write it down and put it up there. Now we spoke a little bit, or one of the tickets we saw before was around, reactively writing some interview questions as you're running into an interview. So you might have a cute, it's a bit small, but I've got a little tag on here which shows what quadrant these pieces come from. So this is a Q2 activity, write good interview guides to improve consistency in hiring. And, you know, this could be my weekly goal. And I could think, if I just do this one thing this week, then that's really going to help my team, because I know in 2-3 weeks' time, we're going to be opening 3 new positions, and it's going to take a lot of time for them if they have to all individually go and do this for their different teams. So once you've got your week planned, sorry, go back a step. From this goal, I then break that down and put tasks on the backlog so that you could move small pieces across your board at one time. So the discerning agilists among you will notice that the doing column is very small, and that is to physically limit your work in progress that you can do. And so this is one thing I'm not a fan of Trello for, is you can add as many tickets or as many items in a Trello column as you like, and I really like to limit this. So think about what your personal effective number is for work in progress. For me, it's 3. If I have any more than 3 things in progress, something gets forgotten or not done. So I try to be very strict and make the column the exact size of 3 cards. I should say that my personal Kanban board is a physical board. When I started it, I actually used to have those tiny little post-it notes and use my notebook as my Kanban board and carry that from meeting to meeting. That kind of moved to an iPad, and I was using Trello, which I never found as effective. And now that I'm working from home, I've gone back to it being physical post-it notes. So yeah, I've got all these post-it notes everywhere. There you go. Here's one of my tasks, write my hiring guidelines. So this is something that's front of mind for me at the moment. Okay, so if we think about how the week progresses, we're starting the week like this. We have good intentions. We're going to work on all these quadrant 2 activities this week, and you would prioritize these. So the beauty of having cards as opposed to like a to-do list is that it needs to be contextual, and you can move these as priorities change. So you might have a look and go, oh, you know, what's this one? Writing guidelines for running effective meetings. Yeah, that's probably not any more important than, say, completing an action in my career plan. So I'm going to put this one up the top and then that one down the bottom. So you would look through everything on your backlog and just figure out a priority order. I think we're all familiar with the concept of ordering your backlog, so that's what you do. Okay, so Monday morning starts. You might think, okay, I'm going to pair program to start with, so I'll move this into doing. And then your week happens. And so these are all the things that might come up during the week. So maybe I got that done. That's pretty cool. And the next thing I really need to do, I'm not pulling from the top of my backlog, am I? Is to conduct a PIR for this outage that happened last week. But someone's just come to me and told me that there's a manual GDPR that needs to be done. So what you need to decide is when this request comes to you, where does it go? Does it go here? Am I going to stop conducting this PIR, or does it go in my backlog? So maybe it's, okay, it's probably more important than, you know, writing my personal mission statement, but less, I'm not going to interrupt what I'm doing right now to get it done. So then something else might come up. And okay, so now there's a security breach going on. Well, I'm sorry, but your PIR is going to have to wait. So this goes back on the backlog, and maybe this goes under here. So I'm continually adjusting and refining, and it's all contextual. So I'm going to deal with the security breach, and then I'll look at the next, you know, the top of my backlog and figure out what to do next. And I think, well, because of that security breach, you know what? Now this technical debt is probably, good old Trello, I mean, Miro. This technical debt is probably more important than conducting that specific PIR. So I'm actually going to work on this first. Then I had to like attend that status meeting, and it was a last minute thing. So now I'm doing that. And somebody resigned, and now I have to backfill them. So, okay, so that's my WIP limit reach. So I'm going to move this back. And slowly throughout the week, you'll continue to adjust, and you'll continue to think about these things in context, and you'll get some stuff across the board. Say it's this one. And let's pretend we actually got to conduct that PIR. And right, that'll do. And maybe I did find the time to pay for my kids' school camp so that they actually get to attend. But I didn't get to take the car in for a service, so that's going to be fun if I break down on the way to work. Right, now at the end of the week, I take some time on a Friday afternoon to look at my patterns of work and understand how I've been operating. So there's a weekly review that happens, and this might seem like a whole lot of process, but you know, this takes me 30 seconds. It's not a hard thing to do. And the way that personal Kanban suggests you think about this is in terms of how it made you feel. Like, how did these tasks make you feel? Did they make you feel happy and inspired and invigorated? Or did they really make you feel quite sad and you didn't want to deal with it? So maybe handling the security breach, that was fun. I mean, that can be fun, right? Trying to get in front of the hackers. Conducting the PIR, that was a bit of a drag actually. You put that off a bit. You kept putting it back in the backlog, and you didn't really pick it up. And paying for that school camp, that was something that was hanging over my head, and I just had to get it done. I couldn't be bothered. Pair programming, yeah, that was fun. Got that feature in, so I'm going to move this across to fun. And here, this really is about identifying your patterns and your ways of working. So another pattern you want to look at is how did my backlog change? This item, I'm going to zoom in a bit. This item, this writing guidelines for running an effective meeting, this has been here since July, and I still haven't moved it up in priority at all. Like, it's still at the bottom. It's been at the bottom. So you have to think, am I really going to do this? Like, for everything that comes up, is this ever really going to be the highest priority for me? And this is what I love about personal Kanban. You give permission to let things go. So if this is really important, delegate it to somebody else, because you just need to recognize that you're never going to do it. And if it's not important, just delete it. Just get rid of it. And actually, you feel a little bit happier when you do that, because there's less hanging over you and there's less guilt associated with all the things you'll never get to as well. So I was really hesitant to do this at the start, because I thought, I brought it in with the best intentions, and at the time it seemed really important. But what I've learned is, if things are really important, they'll come up again. Like, it might not be the most important thing right now, but if this suddenly becomes a pressing problem, then you'll just get onto it then, when it is in context the most important thing to do. Right. Hope this isn't too awkward zooming in and out. Right. Oh, I didn't finish talking about this weekly review. Now, the reason behind thinking about how this makes you feel is you're more productive when you're engaged and you're doing something that you value. So you should focus on doing things you value and delegate or let go of things that you don't. So next time, well, I quite like conducting PIRs, but just say I didn't. Next time somebody asks me to conduct a PIR, I can think back to these patterns I know about myself and actually say, you know what, I don't think I'm the best person to do that. Can you please find someone else to conduct that PIR? Or maybe a little bit more diplomatically, I will if you want me to, but it's not really something I'm interested in. So finding someone else to do it's probably the best thing. Because if there is someone else that's interested, they're going to do a better job and they'll probably get to it faster and they'll probably, you know, have better follow-up conversations than you will because you're just not interested. And likewise, if things make you feel happy, you do these faster, right? So this is Canva and this is all about increasing your flow by limiting your WIP. If you've got something that you haven't wanted to do and it's been sitting in doing, this is waste in your system. So you need to stop doing these things. Now I did do this. I had a lot of personal items that would end up in this really sad phase. So at one point I spoke to my husband and said, this stuff really, you know, brings me down. I feel a lot of stress. It's a lot of cognitive load and overhead. So he picked it up, and so he put some time aside to deal with like all the kids' administration stuff that you have to do. And I feel so much better about that because I don't have this guilt of not getting onto these things. He can get to it quicker and he doesn't actually mind doing it. So this is like a whole life tool for me. Am I going for time?
You've got 10 minutes left, Michelle.
Oh, easy. Okay. So one of my tips here, this came from Nicola Nye, who is also an absolute legend in this industry. And she said, you need to be okay with your to-do list. Before I met her, I reached out and said, hey, I've heard about you and I think you're awesome. Will you have a coffee with me? I'd love to pick your brains about something. And she said, sure, I'm on leave next week, but I'll meet you Monday morning. And I said, Monday morning, won't you have a massive to-do list? And she said, if I ever get to the end of my to-do list, I'll be out of a job. So I actually discussed that with her when we caught up for coffee. It was an amazing meeting. And she was absolutely right. And I've really felt this. So you'll never get to the end of your to-do list. And if you do, it means you're working on the low value items. Like we work in such a fast-paced industry where things change and context change so frequently. If you actually got through everything, chances are you could have been doing something else that would provide more value. So that's the way I choose to think about it. I don't walk away from the week and see my massive to-do list and my backlog of work that I didn't get through and feel like that's a failure on me from not getting through it. So it's just choosing to reframe it and think about it in a different way that has helped me. Okay, one last tool, and that's your calendar. Taking control of your calendar. So before I did this, my whole day was just meeting. So it would start at like 5:30 a.m. because sometimes I start early anyway, but sometimes, you know, before 6 is the only time someone could find, so they just book a meeting in there. Or, you know, when you're starting early and you're ending your day at 4 o'clock, people will tend to book things till 5 or till 6. So the first thing you can do is make sure that your office hours are very clear to the people that can access your calendar, and then be very deliberate. And you can use personal Kanban. You can understand what works for you. When are you feeling happy? When are you feeling sad? And so for me, I figured out that if I'm not getting a lunch break, then I go a bit cray-cray by the end of the week. So I am very strict about taking a lunch break. This makes it look like I run a lot. So it should be the other way around. It should be 2 mornings a week. I like to go for a run on weekdays. And this is something I've recently done and has absolutely changed my life. And that's to block out at least 2 hours together where I can just work on things and get into flow and not be interrupted. And at this time, I close my emails and I close Slack. And I used to look at my calendar at the start of the week, and any gap, I would fill it with, a work block. And then I would, when that meeting came up, I would jump on something in my backlog and work on it. But I found that having it at the same time every day has really helped me get into flow much quicker. It's like my brain understands that for me it's 2 p.m. 2 p.m. is flow time, and that's when I can do my best work. It really took me a long time to be able to do this. So it was more like I had to look 2 months ahead and block out these times then, and then work back and try to put in little bits and pieces to work up to that. But now I'm at a point where this is the way my calendar looks, which I find much easier. And I know that when I commit to doing something, I will actually have dedicated time to do it instead of continually rolling that over to the next week. And I often change the meeting name to be the thing that I'm going to work on, and that holds me accountable as well. So, this is going to be different for everybody, and a lot of people have different ways to do this. But if you find that you're doing your self-management quadrants and you're using personal Kanban and you still don't feel like you can really prioritize those quadrant 2 activities, take a look at your calendar and see if you can find something that works for you. Be really ruthless. People, if you're transparent about what you're doing, people are really respectful of your time as well. So, if you've got a personal Kanban board, you can show them and say, hey, these are all the things I've got in flight. Is what you're asking of me more important than these? Generally, they'll say, no, actually, I'll find someone else to do it, or I'll do it myself. Or you can do it next week. Okay. So, zoom again. Just to wrap up, some of the key takeaways is to spend time proactively thinking about what you value, your personal mission, and your goals for your team or your work. So if you don't know what you want to accomplish, you're not going to know what Q2 activities to bring into your time or to your day. Work on tasks that proactively build relationships, prevent fires and burnout, and grow your capability. So I would say for me, this means never rescheduling a one-to-one, especially skip level, and making sure that you're doing all you can to build relationships and have a work-life balance as well, so that you're rested and you can cope with situations that come up. My tip, you can get 80% of your desired impact with the first 20% of effort, and then stop. And this is something that's really hard for all of you perfectionists, but take it from a serial perfectionist. You can do it, and it's quite liberating actually to see the impact that you can get without having everything perfect. So really what we're talking about is managing things and time to managing relationships and results. So it's not about getting through your to-do list, it's making sure that you're getting the results that you want. One tip here is when people are concerned, slow is fast and fast is slow. So if you try to rush through a crucial conversation, or rush through some critical feedback, it's never going to land in a way that is effective. So the tip is to be efficient with things and effective with people. So if you do know someone in your team's having some issues and needs extra support, maybe this is a really good week to just block out some time so that you know you'll be available for them if they need it. Delegate frequent complex tasks to grow other people. And down to personal Kanban, plan weekly, adjust daily, and then review weekly as well. Limit your work in progress and let go of those low priority tasks that are kind of making you feel guilty and weighing you down. Visualize your workflow to detect your patterns and understand where you are the most effective and work there. Just to sum up, use self-management quadrants, delegation matrix, and personal Kanban to work on what really matters and ruthlessly block out your calendar to help you stick to it. And that's really it. That's pretty good timing.
Amazing. Thanks so much for that, Michelle. I think we've all taken some great tidbits, especially you can see from the comments in the group, I've already picked out the spot for my personal Kanban board. I don't think we've got any questions so far in the group. Does anyone want to shout out with any?
I have one question. That Miro board was fantastic, and I know I'm going to create a personal Kanban just like what you had. Is that available? Is it possible for you to share that, or
The actual Miro board?
Well, not necessarily the whole board, but I'm just wondering if that's a useful resource for people to get started with creating their own personal Kanbans.
That'd be awesome. Even just a screenshot of each of the sections
Yeah,
you showed
exactly.
us on the Miro.
Yeah.
I can absolutely do that. Yeah.
It's pretty.
Yeah, it is. And just the examples is useful as well for each of the quadrants from the first two sections as well. That'd be awesome.
And I'm just backing out what Lauren says. I thought the use of Miro for that was fantastic. Do it all the time. It's great.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I was a little unsure. I managed to.
Bron also earlier wanted to know who finds handling security breaches fun.
It's exciting. It can be exciting.
You found your calling on that one.
Yeah, I think you have.
I was also wondering as well, with your personal Kanban board and your backlog section, do you generally just keep the stuff for that week in your personal Kanban board and have like a to the side for upcoming weeks if there's things you can put off for like further down the track, or put it all into one?
No, it's all into one. And I do have a long-term vision board, which is separate again, but when things become actual tasks, then they'll go onto that one.
Nice. So Loren had a question about discipline for those who've tried again and again but haven't been able to make it stick.
Yeah, that's a great question. This is why I like the personal Kanban board, because it keeps me honest. So I'm a very visual person and a very tactile person. So having these post-it notes staring at me and, a little whiteboard section that clearly articulates my goal for the week. And every time I pick up a card and I can, pass it, it goes past that goal for the week and it doesn't meet that goal for the week, it kind of makes me think, am I picking up the right thing? Should I be pushing back? I got very good at pushing back as well and resetting expectations. So I used to feel that I had to respond to an email within a certain time, or even, this is pre-Slack, but whatever, instant message in a certain time. And what I've come to understand is people don't expect things immediately. We have that expectation on ourselves, but they don't necessarily expect it of us. So if you can practice, then you'll get better. So every time a request comes to you, just think, even if you do want to do it now, just see what happens. Just say, I'm quite busy today, or I've got these other things on. Can I get back to you tomorrow? And just see what the response is. And if they say, no, it's urgent, then fine, no, it's urgent. But I don't think anyone has ever said that. So every time I've asked the urgency, there's always been some room to relax and move that. Unless it's, security breach.
Yeah, that's probably not one to be deprioritized, right? But maybe something you can train someone else up on for next time, or help with. So nice. Anyone else? Any other questions? Feel free to unmute yourselves and shout out if you'd like either.
Hey, I've got one quick question, and I dropped out. Sorry, and I thought all of Melbourne's internet went down because about 5 of us across Melbourne dropped off.
A
for
lot
like
of
2 minutes
people
there.
did, yeah.
I'm sorry if this has been covered, but it was just about how often and when to take in new tasks. Like I was curious about what your like all the way to the left kind of amorphous backlog was. How often do you pay attention to the new stuff coming in? Like, is it reactive or is it set times or is it kind of?
Whenever something comes in, it goes straight on the board. So I also don't check my emails all day. This might drive people that I work with a bit crazy, but I'll check them at the start of the day and I'll check them at the end of the day as well, or maybe start in the middle. So if things come up, then I'll write a card and put it on my board, and then I'll reprioritize that the next day.
Thank you.
Nice. I suppose that's part of that discipline thing that is something you need to train yourself into at the beginning.
Yeah. Yep.
Nice. Were there any further questions?
I might add to that. If you can be really disciplined for a week, what you find out about yourself is amazing. You will not have any idea how you actually operate and what you actually prioritize. So even if if something's come at you and you've responded to the email and go, oh, I should have put that on the board first, just write a note afterwards and put it down, where you prioritized it. And then you get this full, complete picture of the way you've operated for a week. And it can be quite surprising. And sometimes that's enough of a motivation to course correct.
Awesome. Did anyone else have anything? Everyone's turned quiet now that I ask for questions in the chat.
I'm going to take advantage to say thank you to Michelle and jump off myself because I have a lunch date. So thank you so much. That was really helpful.
Thanks, Bron.
Perfect.
Thanks, Michelle.
Yeah, and I think we've just about gone over time now. So again, thank you so much, Michelle. I think those screenshots will be really handy for trying to get us into some better practices.
Great. Thank you for having me. It was great seeing you all again.
You too.